Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock and you are very welcome to join us here on The Breakfast Show on Sky News, wherever you're watching us around the world this morning. Some shock breaking news to bring you from overnight in the US on abortion laws, and something Hillary Clinton has called an utter disgrace. We'll get the reaction of the International Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. We'll also get her take on the high number of bank holiday channel crossings and ask, is a plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda really putting people off? The Shadow International Trade Secretary, Nick Thomas-Simons, also on the show. Some uncomfortable headlines about his leader this morning. It is Tuesday, the 3rd of May. Our deepest fears coming true. Protests after a leaked document indicates the US Supreme Court has provisionally voted to overturn the ruling legalising abortion. Ukraine's finest hour, Boris Johnson, will become the first world leader to address Kiev's parliament as Russian attacks continue.
Evacuation efforts stall in Mariupol as Russia again starts shelling the city's besieged steelworks.
Royal security breach, a report about an intruder pretending to be a priest who spent the night with the Queen's guardsmen. Our need for the truth. 15 years since her disappearance, Madeleine McCann's parents speak out.
That's as the man suspected of abducting her claims he has an alibi. I'll reveal details this hour.
Delays and danger areas as millions prepare for their summer holidays. We'll take you through the passport pitfalls that could hold you back. That's at 8:30.
Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
And remember that dress? Kim Kardashian steals the show at the Met Gala in a gown worn by Marilyn Monroe. Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, with the HRT medication shortage still causing problems for thousands of women, we'll speak to a businesswoman forced to go without after hunting in 7 separate pharmacies.
We're all familiar with the dangers of speed, but what about problems that relate to noise pollution?
And silencing rowdy drivers. We'll speak to former racing driver Amanda Stretton about a new campaign to banish boy and girl racers. Morning, we begin with some breaking news overnight from the US on abortion laws. Hillary Clinton has called it an utter disgrace. Protesters have taken to the streets outside the Supreme Court, saying their deepest fears are coming true. The news that's triggered this backlash, a leaked document that indicates a majority of US Supreme Court justices plan to support overturning a historic law that legalised abortion.
I absolutely have to be out here because this is something that affects me so personally and hurts so much to know that might be ripped away from me.
The unborn are human, and we've been killing them en masse to the tune of millions. And so I have no words. I have no words.
Well, our US correspondent Greg Milam is standing by for us this morning. Hello to you, Greg. A very good morning, good evening where you are. How has this come about and when will we know what the plan is?
Well, if the final ruling from the Supreme Court, which we expect in the next couple of months, is in line with this draft ruling, it will be hugely significant for the US. It will immediately ban abortion in a number of states. Others will follow pretty quickly as well. It is unprecedented to get any sort of leak out of the Supreme Court. It's a very secretive organisation. So a leak of a story of this significance is astonishing, really. It's a draft ruling written by Samuel Alito, who's one of the more conservative Supreme Court justices. It was written in February. It could have been amended since then. But in it, he says that the Supreme Court shouldn't just side with the states who want to restrict or ban abortion, but they should go further. And they should overturn a thing called Roe v. Wade. Now, that's a ruling from 1973 that guaranteed constitutional right to seek an abortion. The court has been deliberating on this since December. They're due to rule in the next few weeks. Hugely consequential ruling. And the question always was, how far would they go? Would they overturn Roe v. Wade? Because the court is very conservative at the moment. Now, the impact would be that it would ban that in 12 states almost immediately, and many more would follow, and huge anger, particularly from Democrats.
OK, for now, thanks, Greg. Joining us now is the International Trade Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. I wonder if I could get your reaction to that to start with, please. Hillary Clinton has said, if true, it's an utter disgrace. What do you think?
Well, as ever with leaked documents, you never quite know, so let's wait and see. But I'm certainly a woman who believes in choice for women. And when the Roe versus Wade ruling came through, decades ago now, it's sort of before your and my time, you know, it's sort of part of our history, that that acceptance that actually women should have control of their bodies was something that set a standard for the rest of the world and allowed women to be empowered in this very, very critical way. So we'll wait and see. Clearly it's whether this is a true document or not, but I think there will be a great deal of anxiety if that seems to be true. And I suppose if it goes to back to a state-by-state level, the US will have to deal with that in a different way. But we'll have to wait and see, of course.
What support or pressure could or should the British government try to put on the US government?
So these sorts of laws are, national decisions, and governments, need to take decisions. They have elected representatives through which they share their views, and in America, like in many democratic countries, the voice of the people is often heard, and their campaigning is usually, taken through. So I imagine if this were to come to be a change in a very long-standing law, that there would be very strong campaigning from citizens from across the US.
Now, I know that you've been talking trade, haven't you, in your role as International Trade Secretary with the US just last week. Would that potentially be an opportunity in future for us to express a UK view on this sort of thing?
So we don't use our trade tools, which are about, buying and selling goods and services and working together to improve the routes of trade, things like through digital trade. We don't bring in, but the FCDO, our Foreign Office, speaks on all matters what you might call diplomatic, I think, which is what you refer to, and those continue all the time, regardless of our trading relationship. Our trade relationship with the US is incredibly strong and long-standing, and that will continue to be so. But on all matters, when there are matters of concern, then the Foreign Office would be the department that would pick up and
But you would
raise
expect
those
it to
issues.
be reasonable that they would potentially mention it in diplomatic channels?
Not being in the Foreign Office, I don't know, but I think issues of concern are always raised through diplomatic channels, whatever they might be. They're done privately often, because that can be a most effective way of, setting out the view.
But this is a matter of concern, is what I'm trying to establish.
Well, I think it's a matter of great concern. I think to all women in the US, if this is a rowing back on a 50-year state of things, but we'll have to wait and see whether it's true or not, won't we?
OK. We've done a deal, not a trade deal, but we've done a deal with Rwanda, as we know. We saw the Home Secretary over there just a couple of weeks ago. The ruling to send migrants who come across the Channel to Rwanda became law last Thursday. When are we going to send our first migrants to Rwanda?
So, as you say, the law has now been brought in as an act at the end of the parliamentary session. So the Rwanda policy will now start to be brought into place. I don't have a precise date for you, so I can't tell you that, but I know that the Home Secretary and the team are working very closely to set this in place. One of the things about it was to be able to look back since the beginning of the year. So those who are being fooled and put their lives at risk because of the people smugglers who are bringing them across in those small boats.
Doesn't seem to have deterred people, is the point I'm trying to make. 550 migrants came across the Channel. Can any of those that came over the weekend expect to find themselves in Rwanda?
So I can't answer that question, Kate, because I don't know who they are. But the point of the policy is to make sure that we try and really discourage this activity, because it puts people's lives. It's the busiest stretch of water, the Channel, an incredibly dangerous place to be. And we want to make sure that there are many, many legal migration application
but you
routes, and
acknowledge
we
it's
want
not.
to.
Yeah, you acknowledge that it's not been a deterrent yet, has it?
Well, it's only literally just coming into place. So, like all things, it takes a little while to actually get all the processes
Which is
into
why I was
place.
asking when.
So, and I don't have an answer for you in terms of precise dates, but the policy has been set out, and the Home Office are working at pace to bring that into action, because we do not want people to put their lives at risk being conned by people smugglers to take themselves to the sea.
So we'll find out in the fullness of time. Big day after tomorrow, local elections. What would you view as a success?
So it's a funny set of elections because it's not across the country. It's not all councils. I was supporting some young candidates yesterday where some of them are up for election and many of them aren't, because that's how our election system works. So I think there are some places where there's some close fights, but I think also in many places, certainly on doors I've been knocking on, there's been a continuing support that at a local level, because of course these are all local elections, they're at your council. People who have got Conservative councils know that they've got, great local services, 4 times as many potholes filled in Conservative councils as Labour ones.
I'm not talking about potholes. What I'm talking to you about is what would you view as a success?
So I think, as ever with local councils, elections will win some, will lose some. That's the nature of the beast anyway. But also that, 12 years of Conservative government, there are some
550 seats.
So I'm not close to the precise detail, but I would expect us to win some and lose some. That would be normal expected. But what I think we will see is a really strong showing by Conservative voters who want to come out and demonstrate that they know that locally run councils run by Conservatives are better.
Sure. And no matter how poorly, let's say, the Conservative Party does, the Prime Minister will remain in post. You won't see this as a referendum on the Prime Minister.
No.
Why not?
Because, as I say, local council elections in these strange quizzes are not they're not a broad reflection of the whole. You don't get a picture of the view.
They're a protest vote, a bit like by-elections.
Well, sometimes you get that, but as I say, you wouldn't be able to see that in the whole because they aren't all-out elections in most places. But, as I say, 12 years into government, you do get, as you describe it, sometimes a protest vote. And, that's the beauty of democracy. That's one of the reasons we're supporting Ukraine as they fight to maintain their democratic right to be a free nation.
Yeah, and is that something that the party is preparing for, potential protest vote against the Prime Minister?
No, not at the moment. The Prime Minister is getting on with the job of delivering a whole series of policies to make our country, move forwards in many ways, from, more hospitals and more schools, supporting our police and NHS by bringing in more amazing young people wanting to join those organisations, and continuing to get on with the job of running the country and defending, defending democracy and freedom in a way that in Europe we haven't seen for decades, by supporting the extraordinary Ukrainian leadership of President Zelensky and his amazing people who are standing up
local politics.
to a Russian event.
Yeah, we're talking about domestic politics, if I may. Let me ask you about Keir Starmer and Beer with Keir, that seems to be getting apace. 4 of your colleagues, I think I'm right in saying 4 of your colleagues in some form, Oliver Dowd and Nadine Dorries, Grant Shapps, and also the Defence Secretary, all calling for a further police investigation into what happened in Durham. Is that something that you would lend your support to this morning?
So across the piece, if there were concerns raised by, local people on the questions of lockdown rules, then I would hope the local police had investigated. Richard Holden, one of the Durham MPs, raised this because he felt that Durham Constabulary hadn't investigated it. I understand that there is some work ongoing, and I would absolutely encourage them to look at it, because that's the point. We did an extraordinary thing through COVID in terms of the whole of our population genuinely trying to do their bit and do their best.
But Mr Trevelyan,
and I think all
constabularies should further investigate.
Well, as I say, I think Durham Constabulary should look at the situation again and look at it properly in the same way the Metropolitan Police have chosen to do that. Well, I don't know, but it appears not so, or indeed whether the reasoning that they brought forward, now that there seems to be more photographic evidence, is one they want to look at again. I would encourage them to do that, because I think that gives confidence to the police. We police by consent in the UK. It's an extraordinary thing. We are incredibly lucky, and we need to make sure that we maintain the trust and respect of our police, because they do the right thing. So I hope that they will look at all that's been brought to them and reach a decision accordingly.
Can it be in any way compared to what's happened in Downing Street, though? I mean, more crime committed in Downing Street, given how many fixed penalty notices have been issued, than any other street in England.
So, as I say, I would want all police constabularies to look at anything that's brought to them if they are concerned and they look, back against legislation that was brought in temporarily and for conclusions reached, as indeed the Metropolitan Police have in London, and they have reached their conclusions.
So do you think, given that, Durham Police also, of course, were supposed to be investigating what happened with Dominic Cummings back in April of 2020, should they look again at that?
Well, so again, if more evidence was brought to them, then they should. If they felt they have everything and they, reached a judgment accordingly, then...
because they did acknowledge that they took his witness statement as what he said in the Downing Street Garden, and he has subsequently said that he was a little bit economical with the actuality when that came about. He was under pressure and he's changed his story somewhat since. So, there is more evidence now.
So, as I say, I think as we police by consent in the UK, that we want our police forces to do what they need to do with the evidence that's brought to them. So, I hope Durham Constabulary will do that.
As things stand today, do you think that this is a resigning matter for Sir Keir Starmer, given that he was at an event that broke the rules?
As I say, I'd like Durham Constabulary to look at everything and to, if they felt a fixed penalty notice was the appropriate, statement of conclusion of it, in the same way that the Metropolitan Police have here for a number of people who were in Downing Street at events that have been deemed unsuitable. Then what I would want to see is that same fixed penalty notice. I don't think those are resigning matters for anybody.
I hear you, but Labour came out swinging, of course, as we know. This was Angela Rayner. If the Chancellor gets a fine, does he have to go as well?
Well, I would say so, yeah. Anyone that's in the government that decides to break their own rules...
It'll be a pretty empty front bench at this rate.
Well, then there's plenty of other MPs out there.
What do you think? She's saying that the Prime Minister and also Rishi Sunak had to resign, and they should resign. She can't believe that they're still in post. And as far as Rishi Sunak is concerned, he says all he did was he was going to a meeting anyway, and he just got caught up in it. He's taken his medicine and got his fine. What I'm saying to you is that as far as, we don't know with Miss Rayner, we need to investigate that further, but as far as Sir Keir Starmer is concerned, he was at an event indoors that was breaking lockdown rules at the time.
So, as I say, I think the police should, now with all the new evidence come forward, look at it again, and if they consider a fixed penalty notice should be issued, then clearly that would be the tool available to them to do so. I don't think that I don't think that's a resigning matter, personally.
What, if you get a fixed penalty notice?
No.
OK, so Sir Keir Starmer's as safe as houses then? What's the fuss about then?
Well, the whole point is about the demonstration of leadership. I think Rishi Sunak's point is a very important one, which is, if the Metropolitan Police have determined that crossover through a door was a point of failure, if that's the right description, then they have issued their notice accordingly. And I understand that he has, paid it, and the matter is closed as far as he is concerned. But in the same way, that would be a reason for the police to follow through and to reach a conclusion, and then for the everyone to be able to move forwards. I think, the Prime Minister has been clear so many times that
it's a bit of mudslinging as far as Sir Keir Starmer is concerned, and you're not calling for him to resign, even if he does get a fixed penalty notice. So why are we bothering?
Well, no, I think what we all want to see, as I say, we police by consent in this country. So if there is evidence brought to the police which makes them need to investigate whether or not those COVID rules were broken, they should do so. And
but he still shouldn't resign even if he did.
Well, I think the situation is to clear the situation up and then move forwards. What Keir chooses to do, of course, as a result of any outcome such as that, would be for him to determine.
Great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining
Pleasure.
us. Always appreciated. Thank you. Let's have a look at what the papers are saying this morning. The Telegraph leads with Boris Johnson's address to the Ukrainian Parliament today. The Prime Minister will announce a new £300 million package of military aid. The Guardian reports the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is to be sued by Ukrainian refugees who claim they were left vulnerable to Russian attacks when their visas to the UK were delayed. The Times says rising inflation is set to cost people on final salary pensions about £7,000 a year because their income isn't fully linked to the cost of living index. The Mirror says the man regarded as the main suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann is to be denied parole for an unrelated crime. And The Sun reports that a man masquerading as a priest managed to stay overnight in the barracks next to Windsor Castle. And a reminder that in just under a fortnight, we'll be taking the show on the road for a special series of programmes, going back to my roots and finding out how the good people of Wigan feel about the cost of living crisis. Do let me know if you'd like to get involved by sending me a tweet using the hashtag #KBurley. Boris Johnson will become the first world leader to address Ukraine's parliament since the Russian invasion. Later on today, the Prime Minister will tell Ukrainians in a video address that their resistance is their country's finest hour. Boris Johnson will announce a new £300 million package of support for the Ukrainian military today. A convoy of evacuees from Mariupol has yet to reach the Ukrainian-held city of Zaporizhzhia, and further efforts to bring people to safety have been hampered by the resumption of Russian talks. The Ukrainian president has criticised Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's suggestion that Adolf Hitler had Jewish origins and said Russia had failed to learn some key lessons from the last World War. Our Security and Defence editor, Deborah Haynes, is in Kiev for us this morning. Hi, Deborah. A very good morning to you. So the British Prime Minister addressing the Ukrainian Parliament.
Yes, and he will be evoking the sort of spirit of Winston Churchill in much the same way as President Zelensky did when he addressed the British Parliament in March. Boris Johnson will be talking about how in 1940 the British regarded their fight against the Nazis as their finest hour, and saying that the fight right now that Ukraine is experiencing is this country's finest hour, a moment that generations will remember as Ukrainian armed forces resist this Russian invasion. And also coming, he'll be speaking by video link, but with the promise of more military aid, £300 million worth of military equipment, including night vision goggles, jamming devices, and other equipment that is absolutely fundamental in this fight. Ukraine is facing increasing bombardments along the east of the country, and yesterday a senior US official warned that Russia might be preparing to hold phony referenda across the east in Donetsk, Luhansk regions, trying to annex those parts of this country in the same way as they annexed Crimea.
OK, for now, thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this Tuesday morning after 7:30 as the evacuation of Mariupol stalls. We'll speak to former NATO advisor and expert on Russia, that's Mark Voja. We'll get the thoughts of prominent human rights barrister Adam Wagner on a gathering last year where Keir Starmer was caught on camera drinking beer when coronavirus restrictions were enforced. And we'll also speak to the WHO's special envoy for COVID-19, Dr. Navi Nabarro, on why the pandemic has contributed to a global surge in measles cases. The Ministry of Defence is investigating how an intruder pretending to be a priest reportedly spent the night in the barracks with Royal Guardsmen close to Windsor Castle. What on earth was happening there? Let's find out, should we? Sharman's standing by for us at Windsor this morning. Hi, good morning. What happened?
Good morning. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? Well, for context, Victoria Barracks is home to the Coldstream Guards. They're the ones that wear the red jackets and those bear-skinned hats, and they have ceremonial duties as protectors of Windsor and Buckingham Palace. Well, the Sun newspaper reports that last week, whilst the Queen was at Sandringham for Easter, an unknown man appeared at the gates here at Victoria Barracks and claimed to be Father Cruz, a priest, and says that he was mates with the battalion's chaplain. Now, despite the very bizarre claims, he was actually invited in and later on ended up drinking with officers, where he shared yet more stories. Now, he said that he trained as a ejector seat pilot and had also served in Iraq. And despite more bizarre claims, he was invited to spend the night. And it was only the next morning after he had breakfast that suspicions were raised and the police were called. And when Thames Valley Police arrived here, they escorted the man off the premises, but says that no further action was taken, which could suggest that the man had mental health issues. But despite that, it is a huge security breach, and the Army have said that they have launched an investigation. They also published a statement which says that the Army takes the breach of security extremely seriously, and it will be launching an investigation as a matter of priority.
OK, for now, Sharma, thank you. Now, 15 years on from Madeleine McCann's disappearance, her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, have said their need for answers for the truth remains essential. The McCanns have issued a statement to mark the 15 years since their daughter's disappearance. It comes after the latest suspect in the case, Christian B., claims he was miles from the scene where she disappeared. In the statement, the McCanns said this: "It feels no harder than any other year, but no easier either. It's a very long time. Many people talk about the need for closure. It's always felt a strange term. Regardless of outcome, Madeleine will always be our daughter, and a truly horrific crime has been committed. These things will remain. It is true, though, that uncertainty creates weakness, knowledge and certainty gives strength. And for this reason, our need for answers for the truth is essential." Martin Brunt is standing by for us in Faro, in the capital of southern Portugal's Algarve region this morning. Hi, Martin. Good to see you. I recognise that church behind you. Of course, we saw the McCanns attending that church very often when they were in the early days of the search for their daughter.
Yes, it was a great source of comfort to them. We don't expect to see them here around the anniversary. I mean, I think they've taken a decision many years ago that they really didn't want to be seen out and about in front of TV cameras. They're very private people, and they mark the anniversary in their own way with that statement on their website, the Find Madeleine website, and also a rather moving reference to the Winnie the Pooh stories, an illustration of Pooh talking to his friend Piglet, saying, "But the most important thing is, even if we're apart, I'll always be with you." Now, the story that I've been working on is about Christian B., the suspect, in prison in Germany for a rape, but suspected of being Madeleine's abductor, and he has claimed that he has an alibi for the night Madeleine disappeared. She vanished between 9 and 10 p.m. from the holiday apartment half a mile away from here, but he says by that time, by 10 p.m, he was many miles along the coast having sex with a young German woman he'd met. She was a holiday maker. And the next day he drove her to the airport. They were stopped by police. They were photographed. She went to the airport. At the airport, she was arrested because she was carrying a pepper spray. And most of that, he insists, is checkable. He believes there would be records of them being stopped the next day. There'd be a record of this young woman being arrested at the airport. And if they can't prove they were together at exactly the time Madeleine vanished, at least a lot of what he's saying will establish that he did have a relationship with this woman.
OK, Martin, for now, thank you. Looking at some of today's other headlines for you now, and the Premier of the British Virgin Islands has demanded his immediate release from US custody, arguing he is immune from prosecution. Andrew Fahey was arrested in Miami last week on cocaine smuggling charges following a sting by undercover US agents. Andrew Lloyd Webber's theatre group has faced criticism after it was announced that the West End production of the musical Cinderella is to close, with some current and future cast members suggesting they were only told when the news was made public. The production will close in the West End next month, less than a year after its premiere. In the latest revelations in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation case in Fairfax, Virginia, the court listened to witnesses of violence between both parties. The actor is suing his ex-wife for $50 million over a domestic abuse article she wrote in the Washington Post. She is countersuing for $100 million. Here's Katie Spencer.
Off the back of Johnny Depp giving his take on their tumultuous marriage, this week we'll see Amber Heard take her turn. But before that, the court heard from a security guard of Depp's who'd witnessed one particularly volatile late-night row, which he tried to break up in March 2015.
I stepped in between Miss Heard and Mr. Depp. At that point, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a fist and an arm come across my right shoulder, and I heard and saw a closed fist contact Mr. Depp in the left side of his face. That was Miss Heard's fist. The initial look on his face kind of mirrored mine, kind of a look of shock, like what just happened, where'd that come from?
In a recorded deposition, a nurse hired to help Heard with emotional and anxiety issues was asked to talk through her case notes, including a visit she made to deliver medication to the actress in December 2015.
Client had visible bright red blood appearing at center of lower lip. Client stated it was from injuries sustained in the... and then it's blank. You see that?
From Depp's talent manager came an explanation of the financial fallout the actor experienced after Heard's Washington Post piece was published.
With respect to Johnny, it was catastrophic because it was coming from, a first-person account. It was not from a journalist.
With Depp's witnesses now drawing to a close, having listened as her character was pulled apart by his experts, in the coming days, Heard will now get to have her say. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
It's that time again, and another iconic night at the Met Gala with celebrities showcasing the best work of top fashion designers. One A-lister made heads turn with a particularly special number. You may remember who wore it first.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Happy birthday to you. Now, here she is, Kim Kardashian, wearing the Marilyn Monroe dress that she wore when she famously sang Happy Birthday to the US president in 1962. JFK, of course. Kimmy K seemed to find it just as hard to walk in the dress as Ms. Monroe did. Looks amazing, doesn't it? The world's richest man, Elon Musk, struck a pose on the Met Gala red carpet with his model mother, May. There you go. And other outfits. Fashion's biggest night delivered a ton of surprises, including twinning looks and actress Blake Lively's ode to New York with a twist. I always wonder what happens if they need to go to the loo. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Fairly cloudy today with a scattering of showers and some more general patchy rain for the northwest later on. Mostly mild but rather grey now, with some patchy fog and a little rain in places.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And some of the best pictures that we found in the papers for you this morning. Lily's put these together for you today. A mixture of emotions from these young ladies as they enjoy a day out at a fun fair in Smallheath Park in Birmingham. Following 2 years of pandemic restrictions, thousands of people were able to gather right across the country for Eid. Let's have a look at the Telegraph, should we? What a way to burst onto the scene. This is the moment 25-year-old Ellis Cross, an unknown club runner from South London, beat Sir Mo Farah to win the 10,000-metre Vitality London race. Ellis, who works at a running shop, paid £37 to enter the race after organisers didn't award him a place in the elite field. That'll teach them. And this one, here we go, from How to Enjoy a Bank Holiday Monday. It looks so much fun, doesn't it? Competitors took to the water in hovercrafts at the Allerton Park in North Yorkshire to see who would be crowned champion in the first race of the season. I'd love to do that. Looks fantastic. Now, let's update you on our top story here on The Breakfast Show on Sky News. This morning, the big breaking news from overnight on US abortion laws. A short while ago, the International Trade Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan told me she was concerned about a potential plan to overturn a historic law that legalised abortion.
It's sort of part of our history, that acceptance that actually women should have control of their bodies. Was something that set a standard for the rest of the world. Issues of concern are always raised through diplomatic channels, whatever they might be. They're done privately often, because that can be a most effective way of, setting out the view.
But this is a matter of concern, is what I'm trying to establish.
Well, I think it's a matter of great concern. I think to all women in the US, if this is a rowing back on a 50-year state of things.
Tamara is here. Thoughts, Tamara? Good morning.
Morning, Kay. Well, it's fascinating that Anne-Marie Trevelyan, in response to this huge story that's come out of the US with this draft ruling leaked from the Supreme Court, I think that's the first time that has ever happened, suggesting they might overturn abortion laws, is saying that if that were to happen, and we won't find that out for a couple of months, the final ruling, that it might be raised through diplomatic channels because, of course, ordinarily, although the US has a very different approach to abortion than we do in the UK, that is not generally something that prime ministers or ministers wade into publicly. I remember even when this issue came up in Northern Ireland 3 or 4 years ago, Theresa May, as prime minister, who said that she supported the current abortion laws, said that it was for Northern Ireland politicians to choose the way forward. So even in other parts of the UK, it's not something that prime ministers tend to wade into, but Anne-Marie Trevelyan is suggesting it's so serious that we might do. So, of course, a very important one to watch, both implications for the Supreme Court and for women in America.
I thought it was interesting what she was saying as far as Beer with Keir was concerned as well. She felt that even if he did get a fixed penalty notice, that's somewhere down the track, if ever, she thinks he should still remain in post.
Well, of course, very difficult for cabinet ministers to suggest that a fixed penalty notice is a resigning matter, since the Prime Minister has already got one and may well get others in the coming weeks and months. Yes, I think this Beergate issue is becoming a growing problem, some of the unanswered questions. Labour say, of course, the Prime Minister has broken the law. He has received a fixed penalty notice, paid it and apologised for it. Keir Starmer has not broken the law, and therein is the huge difference. But I think there are some inconsistencies emerging in accounts of what went on that night in April 2021 in Durham, which some newspapers are particularly highlighting, and Sir Keir Starmer is continuing to get questions about it. I think we've got a number of Conservative cabinet ministers now saying that Durham police should at least investigate what went on, even if there weren't any breaches of the rules.
OK, we'll see you for tomorrow's take at 9 o'clock.
See you then.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get more on the situation in Ukraine now. Joining us once again on the programme is Mark Voyager. He's a former special advisor to the US Army in Europe. Hello to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the programme this morning. We know that the British Prime Minister will be speaking to addressing the Ukrainian Parliament later on today. How important is it, do you think, for Ukraine to see this worldwide support?
Good morning, Kay, and thank you for having me again. It's absolutely important and critical for Ukraine to see this massive international support being demonstrated in these difficult times. Obviously, we've already had multiple high-level visits, including that of the UN General Secretary, but also from the European Union's leadership, the US, 2 US secretaries, the State and Defense. So this is a clear sign to Kiev, not only to the government, of course, but the Ukrainian people, that the West has not is supporting them to the end, that the West is ready to do what's necessary to help them achieve victory. Your own Secretary of Defense has stated clearly that victory means the liberation of all the occupied territories of Ukraine and the re-establishment of Ukrainian sovereignty. So in that regard, all these visits are of critical importance for Ukraine.
Yeah, somebody famous once said, I can't remember off the top of my head, speak softly but carry a big stick. And the Ukrainians want that big stick in the form of heavy artillery and other military weapons. That's what they need, isn't it?
Absolutely. Teddy Roosevelt, over 100 years ago, the American president, said that, and this saying hasn't lost its importance. And yes, the Ukrainians, who in the beginning started with receiving, mainly light weapon systems, anti-armor, etc., now are getting, really something that they probably haven't even dreamt of. I mean, we're already talking about heavy artillery, especially long-range artillery, which would allow them to penetrate deep into the Russian-occupied territories and destroy Russian forces there. Also, as far as I know, Ukrainian pilots are already training on F-16s and other Western airplanes. As a whole, it's a revolutionary step because Ukraine is already talking about moving from the old Soviet and Russian-made weapons and standards to NATO ones. So, come the time to accept Ukraine to NATO several years down the road, or hopefully even earlier, they will already be familiar with the NATO weapons, and they'll be, already prepared to use it and integrate it within their own forces.
Excellent knowledge on Roosevelt. You can be on my quiz team anytime you like. We're hearing that a Finnish newspaper is reporting that Finland will apply for membership to NATO in just a week or so's time. Potentially Sweden could then follow after that. If this does continue to happen, how volatile do you think that could make the region, given what we've heard from Russia?
Volatile regions are only those that are not members of NATO. The history of those conflicts shows that Russia attacks effectively non-NATO members, that is Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine. It hasn't dared to touch any inch of NATO territory yet, and the Baltic states, Finland and Sweden, as you said, have seen that. And I must say, Vladimir Putin, with his arrogant, aggressive policies in the region, has achieved miracles, really, convincing even the Swedes to forgo their 300-plus years of neutrality. So I expect them to get fast-tracked into NATO. This is a historical chance for them, instead of waiting for several years, as is the tradition in such cases. And ultimately, this will strengthen tremendously the NATO eastern flank, because now we'll have a contiguous, effectively, border, NATO border from the Arctic Ocean down to the Black Sea and the Caucasus. This is of extreme importance in the global efforts in containing Putin's Russia.
I wonder if you had a thought also, if I may ask you, about the fact that UK, Estonia, I think Denmark, France as well, I think, they're all carrying out battle drills in Estonia, very close to Ukraine, of course. Is that saber-rattling, or is that potentially preparing for a greater involvement, in your opinion, in what's happening in Ukraine?
Well, these are definitely logical efforts in containing Russia and showing the dictator in the Kremlin that, again, he shouldn't even dare touch any inch of NATO territory, as President Biden stated. So I wouldn't make any dramatic claims about that, but definitely, a potentially aggressive Russian moves, especially down into Moldova and other areas, are being contemplated, and therefore such exercises are extremely important in keeping the readiness, the interoperability, and integration of the NATO forces. And again, they send a very strong message to Moscow: don't dare touch NATO territory. What else will happen, we'll see. But Putin has, again, achieved the impossible. He has actually consolidated NATO and brought more NATO to Russia's borders, as opposed to less, as was his original intention. So he's lost even on that strategic account, which is a great victory for the West and for Ukraine, of course.
And in return, we are hearing from, let me just check the name, Dmitry Kiselyov, who is a TV host, apparently very pro-Putin, in Russia, claiming that President Putin has placed the country's nuclear forces on combat alert. How should the West react to that?
Well, this is the yet another attempt by the Kremlin, by the Kremlin regime to actually try to intimidate the West. Now that they have failed miserably, their armed forces in Ukraine bogged down. So at the tactical, operational level, they're losing the war. The only thing that they can show to the Russian people and to the world are their nuclear forces. Again, I don't think Putin is ready to start a global nuclear war. That would mean the end of his regime. And his most important goal, after the reestablishment of the, Eurasian kind of conquest, around Russia, is actually to keep the regime within Russia intact and turn it into a new Soviet system of sorts. So if a global war occurs, obviously this dream will collapse, will evaporate. So I don't think he'll start a global war. Unfortunately, he may be tempted to use maybe tactical nukes at some point in the theater of operations if he believes he's losing the war completely. Therefore, messages by the U.S. leadership and by NATO are absolutely important to deter him from even dreaming of using WMD on European soil.
OK. Good to talk to you, as always. Thanks very much indeed for your expertise. It's always appreciated.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Just want to bring you some heartwarming news from Ukraine, despite the news that several hundred people are still trapped in Mariupol. Have a look at this. A Ukrainian nurse who lost her legs in a landmine explosion has shared an emotional first dance with her husband after getting married in hospital. How can you watch that and not be tearful? 23-year-old Oksana and her groom Victor were walking home one evening in March when a landmine exploded beneath Oksana's feet. She lost both her legs and forefingers, but after a series of operations, her wounds have begun to heal. After the accident, the couple decided that there's no time like the present and tied the knot on the ward of Oksana's surgery centre. Sir Keir Starmer has accused Conservative MPs of mudsling over footage of him drinking a beer with colleagues at a time when COVID restrictions were in place. Human rights lawyer Adam Wagner says the Labour leader didn't break the rules. Hi, Adam. Thanks for joining us. Why do you think he didn't break the rules?
Morning. Well, I've never thought this was particularly convincing as a rule-breaking event, because Labour said originally, this was on the 30th of April last year, it was just before the build-up to the local elections. It was in a constituency office. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and the Labour Party said they ordered food for people to feed them because there wasn't anywhere else open to get food. And if that as a reason, given that the rules allowed you to have a gathering indoors, which was reasonably necessary for work, then I don't see how the police could take it any further, because they've been given what sounds like a reasonably necessary for work excuse.
Couldn't the PM say the same about the meeting in the Cabinet room?
Well, no, because the meeting in the Cabinet, if you're talking about the birthday party, the purpose of that gathering wasn't to feed colleagues or to do anything for work purposes. It was for a birthday party, which wasn't allowed. And I think the difference is, look, I mean, there's obviously everybody in the rules was treated the same. Whether the police action is the same is a different question. But the difference with the government gatherings, I think, is that the government, as far as I know, in relation to those 12 gatherings, has never given an excuse. They've never explained why any of those gatherings were reasonably necessary for work. I think it's only the media and individuals who have sort of done that work for them. But as far as I know, the Prime Minister has never said, look, this is why the gathering was reasonably necessary for work. All he said is, I didn't realise it was a breach of the rules. It wasn't obvious at the time. So I think that's the difference. And from the police perspective, once the Labour Party is saying, Keir Starmer's saying, this is the purpose of the gathering, we couldn't feed everybody unless we ordered in food and briefly stopped work at 10 o'clock at night just before the local elections. Once he said that, it's difficult for the police to say, oh, well, actually, we believe it wasn't necessary for work, unless they can find some reason why what he's saying is wrong or false.
Does it hinge his defence on him having gone back to work after they'd eaten?
No, it doesn't, because that wasn't the original reason. The reason was, I know he said, and we went back to work, but that wouldn't make a difference. The question is, was it reasonable for them on that evening at 10 o'clock at night to order in food to feed people who were working together for the constituency, at the local constituency office for the elections? And if the answer is, I think the answer, look, the rules aren't completely clear. The rules don't say you can or cannot have a gathering to feed people before for local elections. But from the police perspective, they've got to reasonably believe that there is an offence committed. And I just don't see how they could take it forward once a reason like that has been given.
I'm sure you always say to the people that you represent, be honest and open straight from the get-go. And the fact that we know now that Angela Rayner was there in some form, not sure what time, but we were told for some time that she wasn't. That is why more and more questions are being asked, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that from the media perspective, that the fact that they originally said something which wasn't true, that she wasn't there, would get people to say, well, what else don't we know? And that's fair enough. It just doesn't make any difference. I don't understand how it makes a difference to having a reasonable excuse who was there. I mean, if there were, I suppose that if there were people there who had nothing to do with the local elections, such as in the birthday gathering, the decorator and Boris Johnson's wife were there, I think that does make a difference, because it does suggest the gathering isn't work-related, or isn't work-related in the way that they said. But I'm not sure how. The only way it calls things into question is to say, well, what else aren't they telling us? And, that's up to other people to figure out. But I don't see how Angela Rayner being there makes any difference to the original reason given.
It's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for your insight, Adam, as always. Appreciate it. Now, in other news, measles cases have surged worldwide this year amid disruption caused by COVID-19. The UN has warned that the increase suggests outbreaks of other diseases are likely to be on the way. Who better to talk to about this? Or let me show you a couple of graphics. 79% in the first 2 months of the year compared to the year before. As I was saying, Dr. David Nabarro is with us now, the WHO Special Envoy for the global COVID-19 response. And in addition to that, obviously, you've got a view on what's happening as far as the measles are concerned, Doctor.
Yes,
I know that you have young people in the family, don't you? How concerned should we be?
Well, modern life is about using modern science to keep ourselves healthy and safe. And vaccination against the common illnesses of childhood is one of the absolute basics of modern life. And we've got really good vaccination programs all over Europe to keep kids safe. One of them is the vaccination program against measles, but it's been slowed down because COVID has really taken up so much of healthcare. And so we've got an awful lot of people who've missed out on measles vaccination, 73 million throughout the world. And that's meant that this year, in the first few months, there have been 17,000 cases of measles globally, whereas in the first 2 months of the previous years, it's usually been lower, 10,000 or less. So yes, we've got a global measles epidemic, and that worries us because measles can be a very dangerous disease. We just got to get the vaccinations working again, and that's part of getting health services working again as COVID settles into a more regular position in our lives.
OK, so what do we need to do as parents, grandparents, to try to protect our kids, apart from obviously giving them the inoculation?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yes, well, I mean, I think we've learned a lot about keeping ourselves and our kids safe, and the value of hygiene, the value of actually not going to nursery or to school if you're sick, if you can be kept at home. All that does reduce infection. And then secondly, of course, I do want to stress about immunisation. I know you said it, but a lot of folk have actually thought to themselves, well, with all this fuss and bother about COVID, perhaps we won't take our kids to be immunised. And anyway, it's quite difficult because doctors' surgeries have been using different working arrangements. So that is my main request to everybody. Please get your child vaccinated. Please talk to the local nurse or doctor about vaccination options. It really matters. It's so important. And with measles, the more people who get vaccinated, the more likely we are to get the whole measles outbreaks under control.
OK, and just before I let you go, what else are we concerned about as far as diseases, viruses that our kids might catch and spread?
Well, thank you. I mean, there have been reports of other conditions emerging, liver conditions and so on. And what I've noticed is that most of the worries are related to the fact that our health services and our lives have been so disrupted by COVID. So my basic point to everybody is, as things gets going again, please get back into the rhythm of getting regular checkups for your child's health and for your own health, if that can work, because it really matters. That whole preventive health care is key to our collective future. And I'm just going to say, Kay, that COVID has not gone away. So I am going to ask everybody, keep a lookout for, if it comes back again, surging back into your communities, don't throw away those masks, get them out again and be ready to put them on, because COVID does have a habit of coming back, and masks and physical distancing are really important protectors.
Just before I let you go, we've only got 30 seconds left on the show, but it would be remiss of me not to ask about Otto.
Okay, my Otto is fabulous, up and walking well, and with his brother Isaac, he's just absolutely one of the bright boys of Brill near Aylesbury. What a village, and what a beautiful place. I hope they're having a sunny morning.
I'm sure he is the brightest little boy that anybody's ever seen in the whole wide world.
That's right, Kate.
It's good to talk to you as always, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
What on earth's happening in the US? Stay tuned and find out.